How much effort, time and manpower does it take to create, largely from pre-existing assets, a single map the size of Vatican and a story piece which takes less time to finish than a downed Elementalist? Don't get me wrong, this is not an attack on ArenaNet. At least, not entirely. I genuinely don't know the answer, and so I can muster at best an educated guess. Unfortunately, Mist-banned Barons do not hold a candle to either of previous Janthir maps, and even if it did, that candle would be firmly shoved somewhere it wasn't supposed to end up to begin with. Even Janthir Sentry, where quarter of the map is a Kazakhstan simulator, has more going on it and for it. Barons are less than half of the size of Lowland Shore. I fully completed exploration of this map while having a breakfast. Of course, that may simply mean that I'm eating slowly, or I'm taking in portions bound to make me eventually transform into a human equivalent of a roller beetle, but the point still stands. Like I stand on this fucked piece of geometry overseeing the main event. Mursat Shadowcraft Mastery is the most lazy, boring gimmick you could come up with, and story content is gated behind it. Pretty much every enemy is one we already saw, or an old model from somewhere else in the game that was just given an infusion, and seemingly only purpose-built models for this map are parts of the ruins, aka inanimate objects, and only NPC model seemingly made specifically for this map is also inanimate because he's a fucking corpse on the ground. And after seeing all that, I was just left to wonder where all the resources went while making this crap. Oh. There they are, I guess. Surveys are the selling point of Mistborn Barons as a map. They are not perfect, but they are good enough to make everything else passable by approximation. Surveys are essentially fast-paced, bite-sized meta-event chains that can lead to multiple different endings. For example, my favorite survey has us powering up a giant jade construct to direct it through a valley we cannot cross ourselves because of spectral agony. We first gather magic to kickstart the bloody thing, then we guide it through the valley from outside while continuously feeding it magic so it has fuel to keep going, which we do by pouncing above the valley on a warclaw and throwing the magic at the construct, which is the most fun I had in PvE for a long bloody time, and once that's done, we either overload the construct with magic to turn it into a bomb and nuke the source of agony, make the construct 1v1 some other champion enemy for us, or fight a Mursat ghost that steals our construct and tries to turn it against us. These variable endings make repeat completing event chains get old much slower than it would otherwise. And because of their fast pace, Barons are a very good map to just go in and farm events whenever we're in the mood for it. Only problem with surveys is that some conclusions to the event chain seem inconclusive. Chain event ending after some scaffolding with some random animals and not a proper boss fight doesn't have the same weight and impact, and just isn't as satisfying as slaying something big and strong. Also, pretty much every event here, including boss fights, looks strangely low budget. In light of just Janthir Wilds open world bosses, such as Author's Poorly Disguised Fetish and Author's Another Poorly Disguised Fetish, as well as both Titan fights, the bosses in Barons feel lacking in comparison. All four previously mentioned had unique models, fresher movesets, and had at least one fully unique mechanic to their respective names. Meanwhile, in Barons, we fight a construct we fought before with a ghost that barely does anything, a rehash of the Flachar fight, and a big Bloodstone Elemental. Yes, we have some environment interactions, and some mechanics slapped on top to engage the player, at least a little bit, but we're still fighting reused models with reused animations, which slightly spoils the experience. The entire map feels like throughout its creation, resources were pulled away from it. Fortunately, the story content picks up a little bit in quality, which is kind of strange considering it has missing features. But you see, at the very beginning of Janthir's story, we were thrown into the wilds with basically one sentence worth of instructions.
Don't molest the bears.
Two first story chapters of Janthir were practically just bears talking, and occasional run-ins with the Titans, which themselves served comically little role in their own story. Greer had a good initial impression, but after that he was just existing somewhere in a swamp, Shrek style, and we only came to fight him because his stench was spreading in our way. Role of Titans in Janthir seemingly was to set up the door of comically as something that needs our attention. This is why Janthir's story so far felt so bland. From the very beginning, even the culminatory points of Janthir Wilds were just setting stuff up for the future. Mursat, despite being literally fucking extinct, have more personality and more threatening presence than Titans had. That's partially because they aren't just big stumbling buffoons that trample everything just because they're literally massive cunts. Mursat did their heinous acts from desperation, as they faced world-ending event, and many of them absolutely didn't enjoy what was happening. And therefore, those few who were insane enough to propagate the creation of Bloodstone for their own sick enjoyment, and in the end at the expense of their own people, do for very deservingly hateable characters, which is a trait in high demand for a good villain. No wonder then that story pieces regarding Mursat and all their nightmare-fueled shaboingery are much more interesting than talking with bears and stopping overgrown elementals from shitting in the forest. Additionally, because Mursat aren't just some big lumbering nothing, but have actual history with the world and its denizens, things become
arrogant enough to think she mattered and stupid enough to act as such.
A little personal. If I told you that the best writing in Janthir so far are Isgaren's insults, you'd probably register that as a critique of the story in general. But no, not in this case. We have a part in the story where Isgaren literally shit-talks the enemy out of invulnerability. No, this is not exaggeration, it's not a joke, it's a spoiler. It's what happens. Motherfucker was forged in some ancient Seer equivalent of Xbox 360 COD lobbies. But jokes aside, the biggest downside of newest story is that it ends so fast, and that there are some parts missing, mainly the voiceover from some characters, but Arena couldn't do shit about that, as some voice actors just didn't show up to work because of strikes. No, not the IBS ones, they weren't as bad, because of IRL ones. Anyway, there are no major issues, writing is good, and the whole episode is just one massive setup to what's behind that damn door, which itself might be a little bit of a letdown, but it somehow manages to make me more excited. You see, I have a theory. No. The theory might be a pure copium, but I think Janthir Wilds Patch 3 under-delivers on purpose, so that Janthir Wilds Part 4 may over-deliver. You see, the first patch of Janthir gave us the most. 2 maps, decent chunk of story, and fair bit of content, and a complete fucking of the versus modes. Essentially, it set the bar really high for itself. Patch 2 and Patch 3, however, seemingly didn't even attempt to match the first one. Sure, we got Raid Wing, which made all the 20 people who enjoy raiding really happy, and now we got Barons, which made everyone with comically low standards very happy. But when we look at the 3 patches combined, with story and content seemingly all trying to build up whatever is going to happen in Bava Nissos, it seems like the devs are just preparing themselves a run-up before the jump, trying to match or even one-up the bar that was set up with the first Janthir patch with the last one. Sure, this amount of copium from me is rather unexpected. I'm usually the complain beyond all reason guy, but hear me out. Janthir in terms of all its contents already delivers more than was initially planned for with yearly expansions. 4 maps instead of 3, all as raid instead of 2 strikes, game-breaking new weapon for everyone, new effing class mechanic components for Ranger and nobody bloody else, because there is no Ranger bias and devs aren't owing Maclac any money, legendary weapon and legendary backpiece, mini quests for ascended gear and ascended infusions. You get what I mean. If you consider that, and combine it with the fact that story from the very beginning sets up Bavanissos as big thing, and that throughout Janthir releases, level of interconnectivity in maps design was gradually increasing, with Lowland Shore being just an explorable space where bears live, Janthir Sintry being still open and loosely structured, but funneling itself into 2 convergence points where Titans reside, and now with Mistworld Barrens, which is essentially a bite-sized metamap, with the surveys having different possible endings, which might be a tech test for the final big release, it all seems to be setting up that we might be getting a big final map, with big final battle, structured like Dragon's End or Dragon's Stand, where we fight our way through Bavanissos towards the door of Comically, to eventually face whatever horror is keeping them open. But there may be more than one possible final boss fight. And even if we get something half as good as Dragon's End was, it would still be a staggering success. So thinking that this is what they're going for isn't that far-fetched of an idea, isn't it? Or maybe I'm just clinically insane as I always was. But hey, that's just more good old-fashioned entertainment at my expense, which you know and love. Anyhow, a big sign of gratitude towards all the generous supporters, continuously considering my dubious quality content worth their money. You're all truly welcome. Rapface out.